The Virgin Suicides, released in 1999, directed by Sofia Coppola, is a haunting and ethereal film that invites various interpretations and theories. While the movie itself doesn't directly suggest any conspiracy, its surreal and ambiguous tone leaves room for conspiracy theories to flourish. With spooky season upon us, let's look more into the mysterious and tragic fate of the Lisbon sisters. Is there more to their story than meets the eye? From supernatural connections to hidden cults, Sofia Coppola's The Virgin Suicides has sparked endless interpretations, and yes, even some conspiracy theories. Were the Lisbon sisters victim of something more sinister? Was their tragic end part of a larger and untold story? Hello, world, and welcome to Cinema Nostalgica, where we break down nostalgic hidden gems. So grab your popcorn and let's look into the conspiracy theories that arose from the movie The Virgin Suicides. In this deep dive, we will not be doing a review of the film or going over the timeline of events. We're just going to jump right into the conspiracy theories. So let's jump right into conspiracy theory number 1: the Lisbon sisters were victims of a cult. Looking more deeply into this, let's discuss how the Lisbon sisters were subtly involved in or victims of a religious cult, possibly through their parents' influence. The movie hints at a highly strict and religious upbringing enforced by their parents, especially their mother, Mrs. Lisbon, who is portrayed as a deeply pious and controlling woman. Conspiracy theorists argue that the girls were sheltered and their lifestyle wasn't just a result of overprotective parenting, and possibly it is tied to a deeper, more sinister agenda, one that involved their indoctrination into a religious cult, which eventually led to their demise. In this interpretation, the suffocating religious atmosphere of the household becomes more than a mere character trait. It's a structured form of control, and it mirrors the brainwashing tactics often seen in cults. The family's isolation and removal of the girls from school and social events, and their lack of autonomy aligns with how cults cut off external influences to maintain power over their members or their victims. The conspiracy suggests that the girls' suicide were a final tragic result of their attempted escape from this cult-like control. And to compound this theory, many may have suggested that the Lisbon sister suicides were not an act of despair, but rather a form of ritual sacrifice. The theory builds on the idea that the sisters, especially again in their isolated and religious household, may have been conditioned to view their deaths as necessary, offering to some higher purpose or divine entity. In this interpretation, the strict and religious upbringing they endured is twisted into a more cult-like mentality, where the sisters believe that taking their own lives would somehow fulfill a sacred duty or elevate them to a higher spiritual state. The theory also highlights the almost ceremonial nature of their deaths, with each sister choosing different methods to end her life. It is performative, and as if performing individual roles in that larger ritual, like they all had a part to play in this one big scheme. The film's ethereal and dreamlike tone may be seen as an expression of the mystical or spiritual significance the sisters may have placed on their suicides. Their act becomes more than just a tragedy. It becomes a purposeful, ritualistic event meant to transcend the oppressive world they inhabited. Theory number 2. The narrator's unreliable perspective conceals a darker truth. In the film, the story is narrated by one of the neighborhood boys, who recounts the Lisbon sisters' story from a distant and nostalgic memory and voyeuristic point of view. A popular theory suggests that the narrator is unreliable and may be hiding or misrepresenting key details about what really happened to the sisters. In this theory, the boy's obsession with the Lisbon sisters distorts the truth, and their retelling might gloss over darker, more disturbing events that led to the girls' suicides. For example, some theorists speculate that the boys themselves were more directly involved with the girls' fates, possibly contributing to their isolation or playing a role in pushing the girls towards their tragic ends. The idealized, almost dreamlike version of the story represented by the narrator may serve to cover up their guilt, transforming a darker reality into a tale of unattainable beauty and mystery. Maybe they did something to the girls one by one and then set it up to make it look like it was unaliving. This theory resonates with me because, again, the narrator is not reliable. We are only seeing things from his point of view. So if he is retelling the story, would he retell it in a way that makes him look guilty? Or that he was only viewing the situations and events from far away without playing a direct role. I think that this is actually one of the most interesting theories. It's like we are hearing it from the villain's point of view, and maybe he did have something to do with it, but of course he wouldn't tell us, which makes it even more reliable and a suspecting theory. Theory number 3, this unalivings were staged. This theory suggests that the Lisbon sisters' unaliving were not unalivings at all, but rather a staged event orchestrated by their parents, particularly Mrs. Lisbon. This theory focuses on the extreme control of Mrs. Lisbon and the power she has over her daughters, and how the family's intense isolation created a toxic environment. Many people may argue that Mrs. Lisbon, in her desperation to maintain control over her daughters' lives, orchestrated their unalivings to preserve the family's strict moral code or prevent them from growing up and asserting their independence. According to this theory, the mass unaliving is portrayed as a cleansing act of sorts, where Mrs. Lisbon removes the girls from the world that she deems corrupt and sinful. In this theory, it is possible that the Lisbon parents just continued to lock the girls away, keeping them in the house forever. The unalivings were a way to keep the neighbors from suspecting their vicious acts of essentially kidnapping the girls. This idea plays on the film's thematic connection between death, repression, and purity. Some even may say that the father, Mr. Lisbon, may have been complicit or too passive to stop it. The film's hazy, dreamlike atmosphere could be seen as a reflection of how the truth is just shrouded in so much mystery, with the actual events of the sisters' unaliving left deliberately ambiguous. This conspiracy theory adds layers to the intrigue of this movie, transforming its quiet suburban tragedy into a tale of potential manipulation, dark and hidden truths, inviting viewers to speculate about what may have really happened behind those closed doors. Theory number 4, the Lisbon sisters were ghosts all along. In this theory, the Lisbon sisters weren't even alive in a traditional sense, but rather spirits or manifestations of the boys' collective imagination. The theory is built on the film's hazy, ethereal, otherworldly presentation of the girls, who are often framed in soft lighting, and there seems to be a filter or a haze over the film and the movie. They seem unreachable, unattainable, not just in the physical sense, but in the mental and spiritual sense. Throughout the movie, the sisters seem more like mysterious, mythological creatures than real people. They're mystics, as the boys obsess over their beauty and their enigmatic presence. This theory poses that the girls' lives are merely a projection of the boys' fantasies and desires, and their unaliving symbolizes the end of this fantasy. The long-distant memory of the boys and the retelling of these events is often presented in films that align with how ghost stories are often told, through the lens of those left behind, and with the ghosts symbolizing unresolved emotions or experiences. Did the boys have a special gift, like something in the sixth sense, that allowed them to see the girls in another way or in another light when they were really just spirits lurking around this neighborhood? We don't know, but it is an interesting theory. The next theory, the narrator of this movie was dreaming all along. Here we have another theory of the girls just not existing in the physical sense at all. And the boys recount their memories with a blend of nostalgia and obsession, but just realizing that it was a dream all along. Their perspective is colored by longing and fantasy, and not even seeing the real truth of the girls anyway. So who's to say that they were even around, but just a manifestation of the boys' imagination? As you are children, you do sometimes create imaginary friends. Did they also invent imaginary girlfriends where they're all sisters, all living in the same house? But of course, they can't date them, not in the physical, not in the real, because it's not real. It's all a dream. It's all just a fantasy. Dreams often serves as a means of exploring subconscious thoughts and desires. The boys' fixations on the sisters can be interpreted as a reflection of their adolescent yearnings or their fears. In this theory, the Lisbon sisters become symbols of unattainable ideals, representing purity, beauty, and the complexities of femininity. It could also go back to the boys' insecurity, how they could never actually be with these girls in real life. They don't have what it takes to be their boyfriends. It's just a dream. It's just a fantasy that they all just made up one day. And because they can't be with them in real life, they had to unalive them in their story, in their narrative. In the novel, it talks about how when the boys are grown up and they are always talking about what happened with the girls, maybe they're just, again, revisiting their playtime, their imaginary time, when they were like, oh, remember when we created like these girls and that's what happened? I mean, we could just see how the fantasy of a young boy can just explode into full on obsession. I mean, if we want to take it another farther, maybe the boys were playing with their dolls and named all of the girls their Barbie dolls. Maybe they were literally just in the backyard and their fairy tale land of this house and these girls and their dreamlike presence was just manifested because they were playing with Barbies or playing with dolls. We know that boys have action figures and maybe they took one of their sister's toys or maybe they were playing with just toys of their own. But I am very interested in exploring this theory of them just using adolescent figures and their imagination to create this intense dreamlike state and this intense fantasy that is just obsessive and takes over their mental thinking. Going back to the more supernatural theories, the Lisbon family was cursed. A more fantasy inspired conspiracy theory suggests that the Lisbon family was under a curse, which ultimately led to the unaliving of the sisters. This curse, according to the theory, could have been placed on the family long before the events of the film, or perhaps it's tied in with the family's deep seated religious fever, or an unknown family secret, or maybe it's the house itself that's haunted. Supporters of this theory argue that the Lisbon home itself, which is portrayed as gloomy, oppressive, it just may have been cursed, and everything and everyone that touched that house was affected. This house creates a suffocating atmosphere that doomed the sisters to their tragic fates. The curse theory provides an explanation for the family's extreme isolation and dysfunction. Their whole house was their life. They couldn't leave. They were closed in by its walls. And with the rules and oppression that was placed on them from their parents, we can literally just see the walls closing in on them. This could be a manifestation of the actual curses that resonated in the neighborhood and settled into this house. Their unalivings seem as an inescapable result of a supernatural force that predestined their downfall. The boys' ability to understand and narrate or intervene in the sisters' lives just couldn't happen because it was divine. It was their fate. So, just adds to the idea that something beyond ordinary comprehension was at play here. This movie always gives me the chills when I watch it. I am constantly looking for deeper meaning or an escape route for the girls. Nothing about this film is straightforward, and the viewer is left with unexplained answers to the tragedy of this film. We are left to come up with our own answers, which explain some of the theories stated in this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel if you like nostalgic deep dives like this. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.